Seminar, Day 1, Educate. And we're really excited to have this individual with us and this organization with us today. For those who do not know, we want you to all go research Groundswell. Groundswell, also formerly known as OC Human Relations, has been around Orange County for years, conducting work and also providing resources to individuals who have felt victim to hate crimes or hate incidents. Today, we have Ginrich Moua. I think I said it right this time. Um, and Ginrich is an American who has been working with Groundswell for almost 3 years as an administrative liaison and a training specialist. They completed their undergrad and graduate degree at Cal State Long Beach in political science, studying American politics and affecting communities and individuals, and having a Hmong immigrant background has interested in working in these communities and working around diversity, equity, and inclusion. They initially worked on Hate Hurts Us All, which is a program with the County of Orange in response to the rise of AAPI hate crimes. In this program, a call center was established to report hate activity happening in Orange County, which then increased visibility in these communities experiencing hate, especially with our AAPI siblings. In addition to creating this program, Groundswell has historically tracked hate activity and released reports every year. This annual report typically consists of data on hate crimes, hate incidents, trends, and hate activities, and recommendations. Today, Ginrich will be presenting the 2002 Orange County Hate Crime Report that Groundswell helped release. Considering Groundswell has been around for so long in the Orange County um, industry, we are very, very, very grateful and honored to have Ginrich be here to present this hate crime report. And we're excited to have Groundswell continue to work with us as we continue to fight back against hate in the Orange County community and, quite frankly, across California. So, with that said, I'm going to welcome Ginrich to the stage. We really appreciate you and thank you for joining us today. How's everything going?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Great, I'm great. We're really happy to have you with us today. And speak about the work that Groundswell has been doing for so long. Really honored that you all have decided to collaborate with us on this Stop the Hate seminar and share the data that I think so many individuals in this community should be aware of. So thank you, Ginrich. The stage is yours, and I'll let you do your thing.
Yeah, and thank you, Justice, and thank you again, OCJI, for having us here and having me here. And also, just thank you to Monica Harris for the wonderful conversation. It actually transitions us into what I will be presenting today because Monica Harris opened up the conversation about the extremism that exists across America. And the presentation that I'm going to share is actually going to be more centered in Orange County and also more in the field examples, of everything that Mrs. Harris was talking about just earlier. So really excited to dig into the 2022 hate crime report with you all, and let's get started. So go ahead and please start the presentation, please. So before we continue, we always like to describe what is a hate crime. So a hate crime is defined by the California Attorney General, a crime that's against a person, a group, or property motivated by the victim's real or perceived protected social group. And just in case you're wondering, protected social groups include disability groups, gender, nationality, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, and or association with a person or a group one or more of these actual or perceived characteristics. Uh, I'm going to dive into a little bit more of some of the examples of hate crimes, but before I do that, we're going to talk about what is a hate incident in the next slide. So, a hate incident is a behavior that is motivated by bias toward and or hate of a person's real or perceived protected social group identity. And the protected social groups are, again, as I said earlier, disability, gender, nationality, race, ethnicity, religion, etc. And so, um, as I demonstrate the difference between hate crime and hate incident, please go on to the next slide. Thank you. So a hate crime is a crime that's included with the bias motivation. So an example of a hate crime are physical violence. Things we've also seen are vandalism and or graffiti. So things that we've seen in this 2022 year were slurs that directly said the N word towards the Black community, um, anti Semitic language towards the Jewish community as well. And so those are obviously crimes, damage to property, but also rooted in hate, sending a message about a certain identity and saying that it's okay to not only say these things about a certain identity group, but that it's okay to devalue them and that to publicize that and to really build that sentiment that it's okay to feel that kind of bias hate against them. And again, just to reiterate what Mrs. Harris said, these are some of the really extreme examples of hate that are happening within our backyard. But then the reality is also that we are dealing with them in our backyards, is that they are happening, even though they might feel a little far, few in between. These things are really happening and they're happening at such intense levels. And it's not also just rooted in hate crimes. These things happen in hate incidents as well. And on the right side, you see that hate incidents include behavior plus the bias motivation. And so these things can look like name calling during school. I think we've all grown up with either being called some type of like racial slur or some type of name against our religion or sexuality, racial slurs. And we also see a lot of social media posts, right? Again, connecting to Mrs. Harris's presentation, social media and media itself can really heighten how we show up towards other people. So again, if these folks are really hateful and have these really extreme feelings, they might be inclined to go on social media and post something or post a picture on Facebook or repost something on Instagram that's rooted in trying to make an identity group look terrible and unvalued. But that's not the case, and that's not what we want in this world. And so, just to take a glance at the data itself in 2022, understanding the difference between hate crime versus hate incident. In the next slide, please. That in 2022, we had 450 reported hate crimes and hate incidents in Orange County. So, again, altogether, 450. And this was closely reflected in the DOJ's report that year as well. And so, in our report, it showed that there was a 94% increase in hate activity compared to the 5 years since 2018. And so, what that tells us is that, again, reflective of what Mrs. Harris was sharing with us, is that there have been these increased conversations of extremism in hate, right? It not only is in conversations in medias that we're consuming, but it turns into action, is what we're seeing based on this data. And out of the 450 reported hate crimes, 160 hate crimes and incidents, 162 of those were hate crimes, and 288 8 of those were hate incidents in 2022. Something I also like to share is that hate crimes are a lot more recognized with big industries such as government, law enforcement, and the attorney general. So those are the big ones that they have eyes on. What we have eyes on more on a local level are the hate incidents, because these things oftentimes go unnoticed. These things kind of oftentimes go pushed under the rug because it's not as intense as something as a hate crime, right? Writing a social media post, as hateful as it is to say, I hate gay people, or I don't think gay people should have rights, or I don't think black people should have rights, or et cetera, right? is is hateful, yes, but it doesn't have a consequence such as physical violence and or vandalism. But what I also recognize too is that hate incidents and hate crimes are oftentimes very interrelated, right? You can do a hate incident, and you can write a social media post, but that can lead to violence, right? It- Writing and expressing your hate can lead into action. And so, to us at Groundswell, that's why it's just as important to keep an eye on hate incidents, because those are related to hate crimes. Where again, to us, it's like, why do we need to wait to recognize a hate crime before we want to be proactive or reactive to a situation, as opposed to acknowledging that there are conversations being had in social media groups. Um, there's a recognized neo-Nazi group that lives in Orange County, right? Okay, sure, they want to use social media to express themselves, but oftentimes, again, those are leading into actions that really, really affect BIPOC communities specifically in this situation. So, again, just taking a glance at the 450 reported hate crimes, understanding that a smaller portion are hate crimes, and a larger portion are hate incidents, but all of those together really make the story come together. But let's break that down a little bit in the next slide, please. So thank you. So unfortunately, just due to some of the formatting, the slides a little cut off, but it says 2022 hate crime bias motivations. And so 73 of the hate crimes were motivated in race, which in Orange County is recognized as the highest motivation of hate is race. So why is it important for us to convene today and educate ourselves today and to address eradicating hate? Because it is the largest reasoning as to why folks are being targeted because of their race. And I'm going to jump a little bit ahead, but if you can tell that the 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 graphs themselves are also divided between color. For race, which is that light blue one, the biggest section, that's actually the Black community. So in race itself, it's the Black community that's targeted the most in Orange County. And as we see, the second motivation, the second biggest motivation, is religion. And that one is anti Semitism or anti Jewish hate. Again, um, rooted in religion, but also in culture and race as well, specifically with the Jewish community. But again, recognizing that, yeah, that's a real issue, is anti-Semitism existing in Orange County. And then sexual orientation revolves around gay folks, and gender includes transgender folks and usually women as well. But we also see cases with disability. And in the other section, we oftentimes see that recognizing that these the motivation for hate and the hate crimes are actually rooted in multiple identities. I laugh a little bit in the sense that, like, it's not just that it's someone who might be black, but it could be someone who's black and gay. It could be someone who's black and Jewish, that's targeted. It could be someone that's a black person and a woman, or an Asian person and a woman. Again, as Justice shared earlier, I started this work in response to the rise in anti AAPI hate, anti Asian hate, uh, because it was such a huge issue during the pandemic. Hearing things like, you know, it was a China virus started by Asian people, even so deep as conspiracies of, it's Asian people trying to, take over America by spreading a virus. So all of these, again, this rhetoric, this hate incidents, right? The social media posts, the conversations, the other type of media that's being talked about. Uh, that was being talked about during the pandemic about the Asian community really led into real incidents of violence and hatred and literally pushing Asian folks as they saw them because they were just so hateful. And so that's our data broken down in hate crimes. But let's talk about some of the trends in the next slide in relationship to that. So again, Orange County has seen an increase in hate crimes by 75% and hate incidents by 142% in the last 5 years. And again, recognizing that the Black community was the most targeted for race related hate crimes, it made up for 52% of those hate crimes, and they made up for 43% of hate incidents. So again, not just in hate crimes, but also largely in hate incidents too. The Jewish community was also targeted for religious related activity, and that made up about 20% of the hate crimes that happened that year. And again, recognizing that there was a 178% increase in the bias motivated hate activity in schools compared to 2021. So again, just in a year, there was this increase in bias motivated hate. And I think we can kind of recognize why that happened, right? In the pandemic, we're stuck inside the house, everyone's really nervous, really scared about what's happening on a global scale. And we're stuck in home trying to figure things out. Lots of rhetoric is happening within the last 2 years, right? 2019 to 2020. And so when schools start to open up again just a little bit in 2021, there becomes a lot of tension. Oh, is it a certain community is the reason why we're having so much turmoil? Maybe they're so close to, an uncle or a parent or a family relative that's spewing these things, right? Sharing these conversations of, oh, it's, that China virus, right? All those rhetoric, all that media feeding into tensions that, again, when we get into this weird situation of going back to work, going back to school, being in person, but yet still, 6 feet apart, wearing masks, figuring out if we're going to get a vaccine, all that stuff. I think at that time we had just gotten the vaccine. So again, still kind of like who's getting a vaccine, who's not getting a vaccine, right? Again, all of that feeding into that tension, into the increase. And then also recognizing in the last part that there was a 126% increase in the anti LGBTQ hate activity and reported compared to 2021. And we actually still hear some of that today, especially in some of the cities in Orange County, where they're even trying to pull some trans policies within cities and schools. So, again, recognizing the increase, but also understanding that these conversations, these incidents are still happening about 2, 3 years later. Again, recognizing why it's so important to have these conversations as a group. So those are noteworthy trends. Let's talk about how to report it in the next slide. So how to report, again, this is the program in the call center that I personally was able to participate in and help build up. The call center is centralized with 211 OC United Way, and how you can report hate is through calling 211, or there's an online form, hatecrime.211oc.org, or I've even done 211oc.org, and you can easily find the hate crime page on there as well. And you can also text as well. Historically, when we set up this program, the calls were the biggest avenue for folks to report hate. And I think what was really interesting with this program specifically was that we got a lot of calls during this time, almost one every day to, to once a week, twice a week. I apologize for that. And some of these were really intense and very real, very live situations of, hey, I was just called X because of my race, religion, gender, etc. Or even oftentimes we got folks who were advocates of victims of hate incidents and hate crimes. And what we kind of saw was an increase in uh, the calls and the data, but I also feel like we also just opened up the avenue, made it more accessible for folks to actually have access to, hey, actually, what I went through was like about my race, and I actually have the resource to report that and to share that with someone, so that way we can document it, track it, and do something about it. Um, and I say that because even through the call center, we had 8 different languages for the biggest communities that exist in Orange County, and giving folks so much access and resource, allowing folks again the opportunity to really reach us and really reach the program of reporting. We got influxes, and again, I think it's like these things were probably happening consistently even before we set up these programs. But now, because of this program, we're able to put that on paper and implement that in a report and really showcase that, yeah, like it may not necessarily be an increase of activity, but now we can see it more because of this program, because of this call center. And so that's something I really like to highlight specifically with this call center. And it's still up and running today. The program has changed a little bit where I'm no longer on the program. A lot of our staff are no longer on the program, but the program itself still does exist and is a very, very helpful way for a lot of folks to get connected, because not only can you report hate, but you can also see yourself get connected to other resources, resources that have included shelter, finding food, um, financial assistance for rent. Some of those are examples of just how folks were able to be connected beyond reporting as well. And our last slide is going to be about after report recommendations. And so we have 3 buckets: the narrative, the safety, and the funding. So the narrative is that we want to increase the understanding of our differences and diversity, and understanding that there's nothing wrong with being different. There's nothing wrong with having different identities. That shouldn't be the basis of why we build hate towards other people. And again, I just have to harp on Mrs. Harris's presentation of that's where a lot of the reason why hate builds is because we fear that difference. We fear that someone of a different religion, someone of a different sex, someone of a different gender than us. So it makes us feel uncomfortable. And that uncomfortableness turns into anger and frustration and hate and then violence. And so, again, when we increase the understanding of our differences, it helps alleviate that anxiety, which leads into that next part about dispelling misinformation about anti Semitism, about racism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, and all the other forms of oppression, right? And to reject the normalization of bias motivated hate. I think, with a lot of folks that get really entrenched in this work, that it does feel very normalized of like when we get a call one day, it's just like, oh, it's happening again. But also recognizing that it's happening, but we also have the ability to respond and to stop it and to really address it and eliminate it. Unfortunately, that last part is cut off, but I'll still read it to the group. Is that um, is to conduct research to find and prevent patterns and trends of hate activity. Again, just everything that I was harping on. Rejecting the normalization of it leads into researching and prevention. And and again, understanding those patterns and trends and addressing them at the root. Our next bucket is in safety. And the safety is to post statements outlining commitments to anti-bias harassment. We've seen that with some of the partnership of Groundswell with the cities of Orange County. But even then, that also, as powerful as that is, it also takes a lot of action post those statements to follow up on the commitment of anti-bias harassment and to adopt the practice of transparency in hate activity reporting and response. Like we say, we we do a lot of the tracking, not only in the large sense, but also in the local sense. We ask local community members who and organizations that keep an eye on specific communities, such as the Jewish community, the Black community, the Muslim community, the Middle Eastern community, the queer community. We ask those nonprofit organizations that also track their cases to us so that we can centralize that information and make it transparent, right? In reporting and response, that the people that are the closest to these communities know and see the most activity and what is going on. And again, the 2022 results are from that, right? The practice of being transparent about these activities. And then again, it leads into that third point of investigate, track, and report both hate crimes and hate incidents. Unfortunately, on a federal level, they only track hate crimes, which is still high in of itself. But again, as I've said before, tracking hate incidents is also part of that larger conversation of, in order to address hate and bias itself, we also have to understand hate incidents and how they also operate as alone, but also in relationship to hate crimes and vice versa. And then the last one again is to support legislation that focuses on safety from hate in public spaces. Again, if we make it publicly known that it's not okay to act hateful, to spread hate, it makes it a lot harder to actually act hateful. It is actually a deterrent to those behaviors. And so that's a real reason as to why that is a big bullet point. Our third bucket is funding. And our first one is to allocate permanent city and county budgets, not tied to temporary, emergency, or even COVID monies. Like I said, unfortunately, the Hate Hurts Us All program only lasted about a year and a half, because it was in this emergency or COVID money. Luckily, the program itself was able to stay alive and still be funded in its own ways, but unable to the fact that we were unable to continue that relationship with the county, to continue that program, where it was one thing to build it within a year and a half, and really set it up and really get the ball moving and rolling on understanding and tracking hate activity in Orange County. But when it when the money ran out, we just we were out of luck, unfortunately. um and there was no one to blame other than just that, it was a temporary emergency funding in response to the rise in AAPI hate. But that said, we built it, we did it, right? So how do we continue that? And also, how do we make that feel sustainable, right? Again, harping on the permanent part with cities and counties. How do we make that really important to make it sustainable? And our second one is to redirect organization budgets for education, training, or professional development. It's one thing to track it and build a program for the community, but it's also another thing to educate and to train, right? Educate on what is hate activity, what is hate crimes, what is hate incidents, but also what can you do? How can you respond to hate and diminish it and de- diminish it? Excuse me. And also, like, how does that affect where we work as well, where we go to school, where our kids go to school, if we're parents? Those are real things that do affect not just, again, community members, but our individual lives and also our family members. And so it is important that we try to integrate understanding hate crimes and hate incidents in professional spaces, because it does affect us. It might affect us in a job interview. It might affect us when we get hired, that we might be the only X identity. We might be the only Black person of that organization, the only Asian person of that organization. I am a queer gay person. So sometimes I am the only gay Asian person in my organization at my job. But sometimes you have to live loud and proud. But sometimes it is a little scary, where if you know that your gender, your race, or your religion is highly targeted, it's scary to be outspoken in a professional setting, because you never really know how people might react and how that might affect your life and your job. So it's important for us to open those conversations about hate, because that's how we eradicate those those cultures within organizations. And then lastly, again, to share grants and private donor opportunities. um, Again, funding is a big thing. Money is a real resource for getting a lot of this work done. And so how do we make grants and private donor opportunities permanent and sustainable? So that's our 2022 hate crime report in a nutshell. That's the end of the presentation in of itself, but I would love if Justice wants to ask a few questions, or if there's any other questions, I would love to continue the conversation with this presentation.
Wow. Thank you so much for presenting so much vital information that our communities should equip themselves with, especially in the age of, we're seeing a lot of communities, especially our immigrant communities, be enriched with disinformation and scared and fearful of explaining information towards other people because they're afraid those other individuals may, um, you know, uh, report them to the local authorities. So having a hotline is important. I encourage everybody who's watching on Instagram and also on our stream to really check out Groundswell. As you can see below, their website is down below. We are groundswell.org. Learn more about their work and what they're doing in the community. And also, thank you, Ginrich, for your work and the work that you continue to do. I know you stated that, you know, um, the funding did stop, but you are all at Groundswell continuing to do the work, continuing to be in the community, continuing to educate individuals on the differences between a hate crime and a hate incident. And unfortunately, a lot of our youth do not know that what they may have went through may
Yeah.
have been a hate incident or may have been a hate crime. They just brush it off. But it's important that in this day and age of the rise of extremism and hate crimes in school settings, especially,
Yes.
that we show the next generation that it's okay to tell on one another, right? I think that's
Mm,
been a stigma, right? Since we were
yeah.
little. Oh, I don't want to tell on this person, or I'm considered a snitch if I tell. I think
Yeah.
going to be a demonstration in education simultaneously in the next 4 years to encourage our community that if you see an instance of hate, you report that. If you hear something in the school setting that you may feel as though makes you uncomfortable, then that must be a hate incident. You gotta report that. Um,
Yeah.
and I also want to mention, though, uh, Ginrich, I don't know if you've read the recent hate crime report. I know somebody was asking about that in the comments. And I mean, the recent hate crime report, unfortunately, was not done by Groundswell.
Yeah.
It was done by the OC Board of Supervisors. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah. And thank you for bringing it up. We also looked at it at our organization, and we respect, them picking up the work after us. But we do feel like, we did historically took it a step further. Again, in
Right.
that report, it was only about hate crimes, and not about hate incidents. And also, even the locations of where they got their data was centralized as opposed to more localized. And
Yep.
again, and again, thank you for mentioning also about the undocumented folks in Orange County, because we have a large undocumented population in Orange County. So it's important to recognize what's going on currently for those folks, the fear,
Yeah.
right? And as you said, the fear of even able to make a call. If I make a call, am I going to get reported for something that happened to me?
Right.
And so yeah, so I appreciate you also bringing that up, because it's just it's unfortunate, but also,
Yeah.
it's important for us to keep our head high and also our eyes on the ground of, yes, unfortunately we just don't do the report anymore, but
Mhm.
we still keep an eye out and still do the same level of work, just not through as this program specifically.
Yeah, and I encourage all the viewers on Instagram and StreamYard to go to um, like Google the OC hate crime report, the recent one. You can also go to our website where we talk about it in detail, ocjusticeinitiative.org, and then we have a link to the hate crime report, so you can see the instance of the trajectory of hate crimes. I know in this past report they said that it dropped by at least
Hmm.
5%, but it was
Yeah.
because they have not reported hate incidents. And I want to emphasize that Ginrich said that earlier in the presentation, that hate incidents is just as important as hate crimes. And if we don't report that and we neglect that, that negates resources that
Yeah.
these communities who are experiencing this should have. I want to go to a question
Yeah.
that one of our fellows wrote for you, Ginrich. Considering your extensive experience with hate crimes and hate preventions and human relations work with different impacted communities, how have you seen the landscape of hate incidents evolve over the years in Orange County? And what strategies have been most effective in both addressing and minimizing such behavior? It's a great
Oh,
question.
that is a great question. Um, so this will be a little bit more of a personal opinion. I think historically with Orange County, we've seen again in the history, Orange County used to have sundown towns, and those were very real ways of building borders between communities in cities. You cannot come here because you're black. You cannot. You can work here, but once the sun goes down, you have to leave because you don't live in this neighborhood. And we can kind of see that parallel with undocumented folks, right? Where they're able to work here, but yet they're still put down of like, you don't get to live with us. You don't get to be around in our areas, but you still get to do the labor for us at a very cheap rate. And so, all of that is to say is that for me, I feel like it's really just shifted, and it's it makes me a little sad to have to say it like that, you know? I wish I could say that, you know, keeping an eye on the hate incidents and hate crimes over the years, that there's, you know, been ups and downs, and, you know, we're on a trajectory to really respond to hate crimes and hate incidents. But I would argue for myself, one, that we're kind of on the precipice of being transparent about it, right? Of really trying to get that information out now and more publicly, that these numbers are going to feel like they're increasing. But I argue that I think it's just, we just have more eyes on the ground now. We're just becoming more informative. We're tracking it now. So it's becoming a lot more visible. And once I feel like it starts to hit that apex, it'll start to reach a point where, okay, now it's time for folks to really, really come together and address this, because again, now it's so in our face. And again, talking about shifting, is that, again, we've seen it in the Black community, but again, shifting to the undocumented, most documented folks tend to be of Latino descent, right? So it's like even shifting within communities and talking about, again, touching on Mrs. Harris's conversation about how politicized races are used to divide us in politics. Same thing on a social level too, where if you keep BIPOC folks historically low down in income and in the economy, that it's very hard for them to rise in power and really speak up on the issues that really are affecting them in very systemic ways. And I think it's important to acknowledge that systemically, BIPOC folks, non-white folks, have the disadvantage, you know. And it's we need to have that conversation, because it leads into things like, oh, well, can I touch your hair? What is your culture like? Where are you really from? Do you have your documents? Those conversations really happen on the work professional level, but also socially and culturally, where it becomes normalized to think it's okay to other people because of their identities. And it's like, again, when we all human and see each other's humanity, we can see each other's identities, but also acknowledge that we're still the same overall as well. And so, in strategies to addressing, I think it's a little hard to. I think especially in this current climate of, you know, we've really just gotten into the depths of tracking and reporting. And I think we're leading into trainings and education, because that's the next step, right? Right now is the next step is to spread this information like wildfire, get everyone educated, get everyone woken up about what's going on to other people's communities, but also their own communities. Again, talking especially about undocumented folks, there's such a fear that there's a lack of information, a lack of willingness to talk about what their experiences are, and that is a form of not being visible in some of the racist things that happens to them. And so, again, being able to build that platform from the ground up of, we're giving you the space and the safety to come out. That's the strategy currently right now, to address all of this hate going on.
Wow, that's a really great answer, and it rounds about how where we have been and where we're going. Right? I think
Yeah,
it encapsulates the instances of, like you stated earlier, where Orange County was about 5, 7 years ago, where there wasn't organizations, or 10 years ago, that is, where there were organizations doing that work, to now, to why some organizations are not doing the work, right? Whether it be
yeah,
funding, whether it be, you know, politics, whether it
yeah,
be fear, right? Those are three instances, you know, funding, politics, and fear, that
yeah,
places a lot of individuals who want to do the work kind of docile to not
mhm,
do it. But since we have organizations like you who are Groundswell, who are doing the work, and OCJI, that's why we're here, to build those conduits so we can let more people understand and know the work that you are doing, to be able to, I would say, invite that confidence into people. So thank you for that answer.
mm,
Okay, another question from one of our users from Instagram. named Nelson Nelson Leahy. Oh, thank you, Nelson. Okay, so here's a question. Drawing from your deep background in combating hate crimes, in what ways can educational initiatives be leveraged to raise awareness and prevent hate incidents in communities? Additionally, what role do local governments and institutions play in educating the public to build a culture of understanding, proactive prevention, and unity? That's a great question. I think we just spoke about that, right? You and I in
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thank you. That's a really good question, and yeah, I'd love to expand on that. Yeah, speaking about the awareness, again, talking about awareness, like you said, Justice, this also affects students, right? If we're not willing to have trainings and education to communities of our and generations of our future, then we're doing them a disservice, but also ourselves, right? The present matters just as well. So even for the adults, that it's important for us to have this education and find avenues. Again, Orange Groundswell, sorry, I apologize. Groundswell, we do those trainings. And also again, partnering with OCJI is just another avenue of expanding these education opportunities about addressing hate crimes and hate incidents, and again building that awareness literally in this moment. I want to touch on the government role next, because we've had a few instances where we had, I apologize, I forget what local legislation it was, but we had local, like, in law enforcement and um, government individuals and nonprofit organizations come together and sign a bill that was a stand against anti religious hate, anti racial hate, all that stuff. And it's really powerful because when you can get a system like local government to stand for the people that it serves, it really does make a statement. um, it really does showcase who's where and how many people are there, because we have seen in recent events that there have been local Orange County cities that have been doing the opposite, trying to get rid of trans policies, trying to get rid of the LGBTQ flag during Pride Month, and even just in general, trying to host up a plaque that is very, very transparent about how it platforms MAGA, you know? And when you see it on the other end, it again really showcases why it's important for government, especially local government, to be involved in these conversations, because when they make a stand, it empowers the individuals and the communities again that they serve to be also making a stand and say, you cannot act that way in our city, in our community, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our homes, because we know that those are going to be protected. Again, when we see it on the other end, that's when we start to see a lot of, honestly, a lot of violence and a lot of hate build, because a lot of those sentiments lead into, again, even book bannings at this point. So just want to really touch on that as to why local government should be involved.
Yes, I, I wanted to, add on that in Orange County specifically, we're seeing individuals, like you said, who are emboldened by this current administration start to enact policies that are endangering our communities, whether it be in Huntington Beach. We have
Mhm,
seen that they have decided to create a plaque in
mhm.
in I would say in honor, right,
Yeah,
of the current
yeah,
president, right,
yeah,
and then that is also encouraging other extremist groups that are located in Orange County to feel emboldened to commit hate crimes in Huntington Beach,
Mhm.
to commit hate crimes in Garden Grove, to go across
Mhm.
different highways in Anaheim and call our Mexican siblings
Mhm.
undocumented when they are documented. These are just small instances in which we at OCJI have heard, right?
Yeah.
Just in the last 3 weeks since
Yeah.
we've seen Huntington Beach embolden themselves and say that they're going to create a plaque of Mr. Um, you know, Orange Man in Chief, right?
Yeah.
So this is what we want to be able to educate you all who are watching today. Is these local governments have a huge role in how extremists and these individuals who want to promote hate and on how they organize. If a local government says that it's okay, then that's going to perpetuate hate. We also seen it last year, right, in London
Mhm.
or in the UK, where we had
Yeah.
far right extremist groups say that there should not be immigration, right,
Mhm.
in the local government,
Yeah.
and then that brought out more extremist groups, right? So
Yeah.
I just wanted to, add on to what you said. Local governments do have a really big role in playing on how it builds more division than unity. And it's we encourage you all to go to these local city council meetings and see what's happening in your local city council. Speak truth to
Yes.
power. If you hear something that you don't agree with, go and speak up about it. Write in your local constituencies, and if you don't want to speak, use comments, Zoom calls. You can Zoom in
Yes.
to these local city council meetings. Whatever you can do to make sure you hold these individuals accountable who are not speaking on your behalf is important to always build unity. Last question I wanted to ask you, Ginrich.
Yeah.
Considering that we're moving, well, Orange County, that is moving slowly towards not really reporting on these hate incidents and what's happening around these college campuses. What do you think we can do at OCJI, or we can do as a youth, to continue to make sure that these hate incidents that are happening around these college campuses get reported? These hate incidents that may be happening um, get acknowledged without involving, right? I want to emphasize this, without involving local authorities,
Mhm.
because there are a lot of communities of color who are afraid of involving these local authorities within Orange County because, for example, in 2021, there was a hate incident that happened, and the local authorities were called, but they did not apprehend the individual who did do this hate crime. They
Right.
actually apprehended them and let them go. And that put more fear into the victim of
Right.
of what happened, right? So we want to make sure we protect our communities and make sure the youth feel safe without relying on other local law enforcement. So what would you say we can do in order to, make sure these hate incidents and hate crimes get addressed without involving
Yeah.
the big
Go
top
ahead.
enforcement agencies?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a hard question to answer because, um, well, one, working with law enforcement for any community can have a lot of anxiety and fears, especially like what you shared, where you're doing this civil thing. I'm reporting a hate incident, a hate crime that happened to me, and yet that person actually ends up getting let go. Like that's a very real experience that does happen. Um, and the thing is to stay connected, to build programs, connect with programs that do have eyes on your community and other people's communities, and have the resources to respond. And it's very true because unfortunately, I've had folks with different identities who have been in this situation, who have turned to law enforcement for support, and ironically, they send them back to us because that's it's outside of law enforcement's scope of work to respond to someone that needs not only experienced a hate crime or hate incident, but is now facing um, unsheltered insecurities, food insecurities, financial insecurities. So at that point, it gets so large that it's also beyond, hate incidents, hate crimes, but dealing with very real things that are affecting them on a day-to-day basis. And oftentimes folks can have disabilities, um, you know and need medications, and so those are also other layers of need. And so that's why I say it's important to get connected, to stay connected with programs and nonprofits that do respond to these things, because that is unfortunately one way that you can navigate yourself through a system that's not going to help you. And it's unfortunate to have to say it like that. But I also want to turn it a little bit lighter, where I have worked with UC Irvine, and their local campus police actually do track and report hate incidents there, and also to us. And we've asked them for their data, and it's been a really huge help in sense of starting that trend, right? Where again, it might be one college that's doing it in Orange County that I know of, but they're doing it. They're trying to set that bar of why it's important to be in law enforcement, but also have those eyes and ears to communities that need that support. Because historically, we're still seeing folks that are still experiencing hate crimes and hate incidents that get absolutely no help from law enforcement in those incidents, even though we know that's what they're supposed to be doing, is to be responding to those. So want to leave it at that, in terms of how people can respond in those situations.
Wow. What great information and great education. I think, everything that you stated is something that we at OCJI could, help out with, especially with youth that are on these college campuses who don't know who to turn to. And also, we could definitely outreach to these communities and these clubs, these student clubs that are on campuses who may feel hesitant with reaching out to their local enforcement agency and may want to report hate in a more confidentiality, and enforcing anonymity when it comes to these instances. Because I know that's also something that a lot of the youth who reach out to us feel as though they trust us with is their anonymity. I know sometimes when you report hate, you have to reveal yourselves, and then people in the community have to know. And
Yeah,
I think that's a huge thing for the next generation of youth is to feel confident enough to report that and not really feel those repercussions. So, I mean, this is great information, Ginrich. Again, for those who don't know about Groundswell, please go to groundswell.org. We have it at the bottom below. Please check out their work. And we are groundswell.org. Learn about Groundswell, learn about the work they're doing in the OC community and what they continue to do to enrich our communities, give resources to our communities. They have hotlines, they do know your rights advocacy boot camps, and they also do work like this where they're building conduits toward unity and change so we can fight back against injustices. With that said, Ginrich, I think those are all the questions that we had come in. Now,
yeah,
we thank you for your time, for the presentation, and for your continued work.
yeah. Likewise, thank you for having me. Again, thank you, Justice. Thank you for OCJI for having us and hosting this awesome 3-day conference. So thank you all for listening as well. And I hope the rest of the day goes just as amazing. And
Thank
thank you again.
you. Thank
Like,
you. Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to continue to work with you, and
yes,
hopefully we'll see you out there soon. I know for day
yes,
two, we may have one of your partners come out and table with us. So we're excited to see them tomorrow, and thank you again. for joining us.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Um, So thank you again, Ginrich from Groundswell, for educating our communities on hate crimes and hate incidents and data, specifically in Orange County, California. With that said, we have our next guest that's scheduled to come in at about 3 p.m. today. This next individual is going to be Mr. Chuck Leek. He is a former neo-Nazi. He has trained or has worked with individuals that have been in white supremacist organizations. He has now dedicated his life to educating communities on why hate is not a form of path, on why supporting neo-Nazism is not really the form of way. So we're really honored and grateful to have Mr. Chuck Leek speak with us within the next 30 minutes on our last speaker of today for our Educate Day 1 Stop the Hate seminar. So we're going to